I want to talk to you about the best evergreen podcast topics for fast success. So here's an overview I want you to pay attention to. So in today's conversation, I'll go through a rundown of the best evergreen podcast topics that you can do right now to actually have instant success. So let's first talk about the arts. So in the arts category, so for arts, you have you can do book reviews and recommendations. You can do creative writing. You can do poems. You can do literature and history. You have user experience design, for example, anything about UX. So this is about how people interact with products, services, or systems. You can discuss existing UX or share ideas for future UX concepts. You have architecture and design. You have game design. So your game design podcast can help listeners look behind the curtain and see the inner workings of the game design business. You can even interview different game designers to get an inside scoop on the hottest games. You have dancing and performing. So here we're talking about learning, news, and events. You have learning for actors, music, how to make it. You also have Broadway. And there is also an interesting topic around magic and illusion. So you don't have to be a magician to make magic with this podcast theme. Discuss all things magic, from retailers selling supplies to famous magicians and illusionists. You can even discuss and review traveling magic shows. It's just fantastic. You have comics also. And you can embrace the multiverse with the Next Great Comics podcast. And whether you like Marvel, DC, or everything in between, comics provide plenty of topics to discuss. Share your favorite characters, issues, artists, and more. You can do movie critiques and news. You can do photography, techniques, gear, and exhibitions. And you can do arts. Now, when we talk about arts, for instance, you can discuss all things arts with this podcast theme. So whether you are sharing opinions about certain arts or providing walkthrough how-tos, you can tailor your art-themed podcast to fit your interest and audience. The bottom line here is that when we talk about arts, when we talk about the topics in the arts category, if you want the topics to be evergreen, make sure that you actually add your unique layer of singularity. You have to make it unique. You have to make it personal. That's what's going to differentiate your podcast from the others. By the way, boss, welcome back to the show. It's really a pleasure to have you here. Make yourself comfortable. We're going to have a quick run through when it comes to the best evergreen podcast topics. The next topic is business. So when we talk about business, think about social media, tips, strategies, and growth. You can do HR and hiring, so human resources and hiring. You can do career path, for example, nurse, engineer, real estate, etc. So there are so many amazing career path podcast themes, whether you are discussing nursing, engineering, real estate, plumbing, or any other career path. This podcast theme allows you to give vital information to people entering your field of choice. Also think about entrepreneurship. So an entrepreneurship podcast has so much you could potentially discuss. You can provide tips for new entrepreneurs or offer a roadmap to help people scale their existing businesses. You can, interview other entrepreneurs on your podcast to provide even more value to your listeners. And this is kind of cool. And as a successful entrepreneur yourself, you can give a unique perspective in your particular field. You have investing. So here we're speaking about stock market, real estate, and commodities. You can do crypto and NFT investing as well. You can actually you can center your podcast around retirement. It could be all about retirement. You can also do how to get more sales, for instance. You can do marketing. So when we talk about marketing, we're speaking about inbound and outbound strategies. You can actually discuss leadership and business. You can discuss mentoring, success stories. Everybody loves a good success story. So this is kind of cool. And you have YouTube strategies. You can discuss SEO, SEM, and more. So SEO, search engine optimization, SEM, search engine marketing. You can discuss blogging. And as a matter of fact, when we talk about business or entrepreneurship in general, you can also discuss nonprofit ventures. And the word of nonprofit is full of people looking for free information to improve their services, raise funds, and apply for grants. So you can actually provide all the information your audience needs to make the most of their nonprofit ventures. You can also discuss flipping, whether it's websites, clothes, cars, or phones. If you like buying stuff low and selling high for a profit, you can make a podcast out of it. This is really fantastic. So Flipping is also a great sort of evergreen podcast topic. By the way, boss, I want to quickly remind you of today's topic. We're having a conversation about the best evergreen podcast topics. Let's talk about comedy podcast. So, comedy is a pretty field, pretty diverse field when it comes to podcast topics. So we're talking about comedy interviews. You can do improv. You can do stand-up. So comedy improv is an art, and comedians who use this method need to invest in developing their improv abilities. So whether you are providing improv prompts or inviting others to do recorded improv, this podcast themes allows you to help others master their craft. And you can do stand-up. So if you're passionate about stand-up comedy, this is the podcast theme for you. You can help other comedians come up with content for their 5-minute stand-up and provide helpful and actionable tips for stand-up comedians. Let's talk about educational podcast. So when it comes to educational podcast, you can teach a language. Okay. You can do a home organization, for instance. You can teach science. You have a mindset tips. So again, when we talk about mindset tips, we're talking about the mental health here. You can teach economy. You can talk about weight loss. You can actually talk about personal development. So the choice is really large here. Let's quickly go to fashion and beauty. So here is another very diverse field when it comes to evergreen podcast topics. So with fashion and beauty, you have a large audience that's actually that you can count in hundreds of millions of people. So you can have a fashion discussion and news. You can do esthetician discussion and product reviews. So if you're passionate about skincare, for instance, this is actually can be a great podcast themes for you. You can discuss and review products to help people achieve their skincare goals. You can have a perfume and cologne reviews and interviews. You have apparel reviews and discussions. So if you're passionate about everyday fashion, this podcast is a great fit for you. You can discuss and review current apparel lines from popular brands. And whether you're helping people find fashion on a budget or reviewing high-end products, you'll never run out of things to discuss here. And also nails. The world of nails is full of interesting topics to discuss on a podcast. Whether you are sharing techniques for painting nails at home or supplying salon artists with helpful industry information, you'll love diving into the world of nail care and color. Let's talk about fiction. So if you're interested in evergreen podcast topics around fiction, you can actually center your themes around comedy fiction stories. You can do audio drama. Yeah. You can do science fiction stories, and you can do short stories. I mean, whether you're sharing your own short stories or inviting listeners to share their stories for you to read, this is a great way to entertain podcast listeners. And you can also try food. I mean, food is really, really fantastic. You have a constellation of themes. So when we talk about food, you can discuss food truck. You can discuss cooking. You can do wine tasting. Always works. You can have cocktails and bartending. You can do all about beer. I mean, if you enjoy getting caught up in the enthusiasm surrounding beer, then you can actually develop a great topic around it. Whether you are reviewing local beers or teaching people how to brew their own, an All About Beer podcast is sure to delight listeners. You can also talk about growing your own food. You can talk about barbecue lovers. So you can have a topic, or you can have a podcast centered on or around barbecue lovers. You can do tea and brews. You can talk about vegan food. You can actually have pizza, bets, places, and recipes. And you can have farm to table spotlights. And this is really great. You can talk about Asian cuisine. It's really fantastic. You also have you can have podcasts around government, or really this works. People love to talk about everything regarding government. So you can have a political podcast. You can have the Supreme Court coverage. So this podcast theme allows you to discuss Supreme Court candidates and other current events related to the Supreme Court. You can share insight and interview experts to provide up-to-date information to listeners. You also can talk about energy policies. So energy is a big industry in the United States. You can share news about energy policies and provide people with information they need about the future of energy in their area. You can have a legal podcast. So if you are a lawyer with lots of experience, you can share your legal expertise by discussing current events and landmark cases. Your listeners will appreciate your passion and expertise. Let's talk about health and fitness. No, health and fitness is another great tool, is another great another great topic that you need to really think about. And by the way, boss, I want to quickly remind you of today's topic. I'm having a conversation with you about the best evergreen podcast topics. And so when we talk about health and fitness, you can talk about getting in shape, for instance. So you give listeners tips and inspirations to help them get in shape. You may also review exercise equipment and wellness programs with this podcast theme. You have holistic health remedies. So if you love providing people with information about homeopathic remedies, a holistic health remedies podcast allows you to give listeners alternative solutions to their everyday ailments. You have helping people to sleep. You have herbalism as a way of life. So this is kind of important. And plastic surgery pros and cons. You can share information about plastic surgery, including the risks and benefits. Different episodes can cover different surgeries to help people make informed decisions about elective surgeries. You can talk about dieting. So dieting, as you know, is a huge industry. You can share your favorite tips and tricks along with reviews of popular dieting programs and products. You have Pilates podcast. You have stories from pediatrics. You can have ER cases. Now, ER doctors and nurses see all sorts of interesting things. So you can share stories about your experience in the emergency department and interview other ER employees to provide an interesting and informational podcast. You have ADHD in children and adults. You can talk about mental health. You can have guided meditations. You can have dealing with grief and guilt. So you can work with people as they cope with grief and guilt, and you can provide tips, book recommendations, and more to help people move past grief and guilt and towards acceptance. You can talk about keto dieting. So you can share information with people who want to start and continue the keto diet. You can provide your favorite recipes and help people cope with the keto flu. You can talk about sexuality and intimacy in your podcast. So if you're passionate about sexuality and intimacy and don't feel shy talking about these sensitive topics, this might be the perfect podcast theme for you. If we're talking about the best evergreen podcast topics, you can also think about kids and family. Okay, you can discuss marriage advice. You can give marriage advice. You can actually talk about pregnancy and birth, educating children. You can actually have a podcast around homeschool teaching for kids, for instance. You can have a conversation around training puppies, or you can have stories for children. Because remember, when we talk about podcasts are not just for adults. You can create a story sharing podcast where you tell stories intended for children. You can have a conversation around leisure, for instance. When we talk about leisure, you have animation and manga discussions. You have cars, news discussions and interviews, fixing automotives. So whether you share information for professional mechanics or create content for backyard hobbyists, there's plenty of information to cover in your Fixing Automotives podcast. You can talk about aviation. So if you are a pilot who is passionate, if you're passionate about all things aviation, this is the perfect podcast theme for you. Talk about airplanes, industry news, and more. You can talk about arts, crafts at home. And you remember, when we talk about arts and crafts, this is a huge industry with a world full of creative potential. You can share ideas for home crafts and actually review popular crafting products. You can also talk about all about board games. You can have video games news as well. Those are always popular. They're evergreen. You can talk about everything to know about aquariums. Many people love keeping pet fish, often investing hundreds of dollars in elaborate aquarium displays. And you can share all the information people need to know to help them set up and maintain healthy aquariums. You can talk about gardening. You can share tips and tricks to help people start and manage their home gardens. Your content can cover all gardening, or you can focus on one particular type of plant, such as flowers or herbs. Totally possible. And another one in this category is music, new and upcoming. So here you are providing commentary and reviews about new and upcoming music. You can narrow this content themes by choosing one specific genre to cover in your podcast. So again, here, the sky is the limit. You can also talk about news. You can have news podcast. Again, when we talk about evergreen podcast, I mean, what is more evergreen than news, you know? And the thing here is that you can have the latest news and current events. You can talk about global news. You can have entertainment news, for instance. If you love all things Hollywood, you can share the latest entertainment news and provide commentary about current events through your podcast with this theme. You can have your podcast around news commentary. You can do This Week in Politics. Basically, you're sharing bite-sized updates to help people up to date, to keep actually people up to date about everything happening in the world of politics. You can do sports news. If you love keeping up with sports news, you will enjoy creating a sports news podcast of your own, where you are basically sharing your passion with others by creating your own sport news podcast, and you do this on a consistent basis. You can have tech news also. You can talk about live events or also local news. Another category that is evergreen, that actually feeds you a lot of evergreen podcast topics, is religion and spirituality. So you can have podcasts about your religion. So whether you are a clergy member or a lay person, you can start a podcast about your own religion. You can share advice and insight to help others who follow the same faith. You can talk about astrology. So when we talk about astrology, here you can discuss all things astrology, from the zodiac to tarot readings and more. You can talk about mindfulness. So more people are diving into the world of mindfulness to help them control their emotions and cope with stress. And here, what you do is you are providing information and guide people on their mindfulness journey with a specific podcast theme. You can also talk about yoga. So whether you provide guided yoga routines or give people tips to make the most of their yoga sessions, this podcast theme is great for people who are passionate about yoga, fitness, and spirituality. And the thing is that, you know, when we talk about spirituality in general, you need to understand it's all about what really works for you. And the thing is that you have to actually be as granular as possible. Like, for instance, if you choose astrology, be as granular as possible. If you choose yoga, do the same thing. Be as granular as possible. You can also try science podcast. If you're trying to really think about something as evergreen as science, you can't get better than that. So when we talk about science, you can do, for instance, astronomy podcast. So here we're speaking about news and spotlights. You can do chemistry. So basically, if you're sharing concepts or providing listeners with chemistry experiments to try at home, there's a lot of potential topics to share about related to chemistry. You can talk about agronomy. So here you can have interviews and developments. You can talk about sustainability and how we can achieve it. So more people are investing in sustainable practices. So here you are sharing information about what sustainability is and how individuals and corporations can help us achieve it. You can talk about climate change issues and solutions. So many people talk about climate change issues, but this podcast will also involve sharing solutions to major issues related to climate change. You can talk about cancer. Here we're speaking about the latest developments and treatments. You can have a story of statistics. So instead of reporting numbers from the latest study, tell a story that explains the findings to your audience. You can have vet sciences, so vet sciences. So if you have experience as a vet, you can share your experience with vet techs and students through a vet sciences podcast. Focus on one animal or vet sciences as a whole. You can also talk about marine biology. You can talk about fishing. This is an important element also. You can talk about zoos in general. You can talk about physics. So this will be a physics podcast. You can have a social science podcast also. And you can also talk about the latest science innovations. So the bottom line here is that you are trying to be as diverse as possible and basically have, like you can chat with, you can actually diversify your audience. You can diversify the area of topics you are actually talking about. So for instance, when we talk about the latest science innovation, so this is a great podcast topics that if you want to dive into the latest innovation in the sciences, you can cover topics ranging from the human mind to space exploration, all the latest experiments from recent years. Spanning all science topics is sure to attract a large audience. People are always interested in the latest innovations anyway. You can talk about society and culture podcasting here as well. So when we talk about society and culture podcasting, you have a lot of topics to actually explore here, and we're talking about anything from you can have a documentary. So if you love documentaries, this podcast themes is really great. You can create audio documentaries of your own or review new documentaries. You can have personal journal, so you're sharing your personal thoughts and struggles in a personal journal podcast. This can be a great outlet for you as well as a resource for others who struggle with similar themes. You can discuss philosophy. So whether you are discussing classical philosophers or tackling modern philosophical questions, there is a wealth of options for a philosophy podcast. You can do travel tips and recommendations. You can do relationship advice, for instance. And you can actually also do interesting facts about life. If you know a little bit about everything, this is the podcast theme for you. You just want to share interesting facts from a variety of fields with this podcast themes. You can do celebrity interviews also. And this is really fantastic. You can also talk about sports. So here you have a podcast about your favorite sports. You can also have a podcast about your favorite fantasy sports. I mean, most people are just as passionate about fantasy leagues as they are about the sport itself. So this is kind of cool. Another area that you'll be interested in is TV and film. So here we're talking about after shows. You can do film reviews and critiques. You can do TV reviews and critiques also. You can move on to technology. So technology is another great field where you have a lot of great evergreen podcast topics. You can do fintech podcasting. You can do artificial intelligence. You can do Android and iPhone news and tutorials. You can do hacking. You can do blockchain and crypto development. You can do podcast industry, a podcast about podcasting. You can do product reviews also. And so the bottom line here is what? You can also, the final topic here is true crime. So remember, people are obsessed with true crime podcast. Whether you discuss certain cases or review true crime shows and books, there are plenty of things to talk about on your true crime podcast. Okay. So this is really, and again, the sky is the limit here. Thank you so much for your attention. I really appreciate it. In today's conversation, I spoke to you about the best evergreen podcast topics. So we talked about arts, business, comedy podcast, educational podcast, fashion and beauty, fiction, food, government, health and fitness, kids and family, leisure, news podcast, religion and spirituality, science podcast, society and culture podcasting, sports, TV and film, technology, and true crime. Thank you so much. God bless you. I'll speak to you another time. But until then, remember, stay marvelous.